Humanitarian Social Y. Reg. The Humanitarian Society was organized when it became evident that the United States would be drawn into the First World War. The society was organized for humanitarian and reconstructive work. The society is not connected or associated in any manner whatsoever with any other group or organization. The society is non-sectarian, non-political and non-profit. The work of the society is supported by the sale of literature and the free will donations of those sincerely interested in the welfare of their fellow men. Your health, your sanity, the age of trees and food and liquids used, as a medium in deliberately and carefully planned methods developed by the vicious element of humanity, for the mental deterioration and moral debasement of the mass, as a means toward their enslavement based on their own admission, and the methods already confessedly employed destroy a man's reason, and he is no longer a human being, nothing remains important or sacred to him. By Clymer Swinbure, Clymer, published by the Humanitarian Society, Reg. P.O. Box 77, Quackertown, Pennsylvania. And quoted contents copyrighted 1908 by the Humanitarian Society, Reg. Quackertown, Pennsylvania. The warning: you and your loved ones are at this very moment confronted by the greatest menace to health and sanity ever known to mankind. Imagine yourself, if you can, becoming conscious that you are gradually losing your manhood, that your mind is rapidly deteriorating, so that you are no longer capable of thinking clearly, and able to plan your future actions. Your resistance is becoming so weakened that you are no longer master of yourself. In short, you are rapidly developing into a moron, a robot, a zombie, readily subject to the dictates of others, and that your family is faring no better. A madman's dream, you say? The nightmare conjured up by fearmongers. Is it? Following directly after this warning there is reproduced page 50 of the 1953 edition of Bertrand Russell's book, The Impact of Science on Psyche. Russell here offers Fitch's outline of methods to be followed to bring about this deterioration of man. He describes methods that have been employed, and are currently employed right here in America for the purpose stated. Neither Pi/Kahn nor Russell stated that they agreed with this procedure to reduce the race to a state lower than the animals of the field, but they did succinctly and in a few words outline the procedure that might be followed, methods now being employed. Arouse yourself to a recognition of the fact that, according to those so engaged, these plans have actually been tried on millions of human beings, first in Europe and now in America. At this very moment you and your family are actually filling your system with toxic drugs which have been placed into your food and water. The plan to be followed is that all but the sick, your health and sanity, few more especially of the white race, are to be made the victim. Unquestionably many engaged in such infamous practices are wholly unaware of what they are doing. However, the American people are being made aware of the danger lurking in their food and water, as indicated by the many articles appearing in newspapers and magazines, and are demanding protective laws. Who is the authority for the statements here made? Not we, but mostly the men and women now actually engaged in one manner or another in these diabolical practices, those planning to become so engaged, and, fortunately, by many widely recognized physicians who are becoming aware of the danger. Inform yourself on how you may protect yourself, your family and your loved ones. Help us to arouse the people to their danger. 50 THRTXR Pack T0 FCE in SOC L at white countries. Ficker laid it down that Ducadion should aim at destroying free will, so that, after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable, throughout the rest of their lives, of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. But in his day this was an unattainable ideal. What he regarded as the best system in existence produced Karl Marx. In future such failures are not likely to occur where there is dictatorship. And I shall we'll combine, from a early age, to produce sort of character and the sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and an serious criticism of the powers that be will come as logical impossible. Even if all are miserable, all will believe themselves happy, because the government will tell them that they are so. A military government with a scientific bent might do things that to us horrifying. The Nazis were more scientific than the present rulers of Russia, and were more inclined towards the sort of atrocities than I have in mind. They were said, I do not know with what truth, to use prisoners in concentration camps as material for all kinds of experiments, some involving death after much pain. If the heads survived, they would probably have soon taken to scientific breeding. Any nation which adopts this practice will, within a generation, secure great military advantages. The system, one may surmise, will be something like this, except possibly in the governing aristocracy. All but 5% of males and 30% of females will be sterilized. The 30% of females will be expected to spend the years from 18 to 40 reproduction, in order to secure adequate cannon fodder. As a rule, artificial insemination will be preferred to the natural method he sterilize. Introduction, whether or not we like it, whether or not they deserve it, in order to save ourselves, we must help others to save themselves. Interalliance is the eternal law, the outstanding reason for the preparation and publication of the first edition of The Age of Treason, as it is for the present volume, was the frank statement in Bertrand Russell's 1953 edition of his The Impact of Science on Society. In this volume he quoted Fichte, first visioning the methods to be pursued for mental degeneration of the white race, as well as Russell and others who followed them. It is extremely doubtful if Fichte endorsed the idea or the methods to be pursued, and though Russell is a profound socialist, it is questionable if he agreed with the methods outlined to bring about the demoralization of man in preparation for his enslavement. The kindest conclusion is that both foresaw the horrors to be visited upon mankind. Russell is taken more seriously than many other writers. He has been accepted by the intelligentsia everywhere, largely because he was a winner of the Nobel Prize, as also for his position in favored universities. There is another and important reason for publishing this work, the fact that we know from experience and investigation, the horrible things even now being visited upon thousands of helpless individuals here in the U.S. These are facts the public should know. An ever-increasing number of requests come to us from every section of the country, urging a thorough investigation, plus the rendering of an unbiased opinion based on the knowledge gained by such. Your health and sanity as possible, the destructive and debasing practices already in vogue, plus the plans for the future to be employed by certain cliques to assure compliance with the edicts of small but powerful groups to bring about the complete destruction of our society, as it presently exists. These requests, in general, have one source. During World War I, many patriotic men and women associated themselves into an organization known as the Humanitarian Society I for the purpose of human welfare, instructions in food substitutes, and aid, wherever needed. This organization was later, following the passage of a law for this purpose, registered in Pennsylvania. Those who became associated with this group, though from every section of the country, were, by their very nature and inclinations, grassroots Americans. That is, they were imbued with the original uncontaminated American spirit. They believed in the American flag, as the only flag symbolizing individual freedom. They believed wholeheartedly in America. They were heart and soul nationalists. They believed unquestionably in the American Constitution, as spiritually and divinely inspired, as an instrument for human freedom, irrespective of race or creed, with every individual free, as families are free, permitting no interference one with the other. To convey an idea of the body of the Humanitarian Society, we compare its functional form, with high regard, to the Christopher Society. Though it possibly antedates that society, it is in almost every respect comparable in organization, or lack of organization, to that of the Christophers. Anyone who is in full harmony with the tenets of the society and willing to aid in its work to inform and aid the mass, may become members, without obligation. There are no entrance fees, no dues. Cooperation is the only law. The Age of Treason 11. They believed in the educational system then in vogue as the most perfect in the world, basing their conclusions on the number of great men that were the fruit of the system. They believed firmly and unquestionably in God, the divine law, and man's subjection to it. Following the war, the association became more or less loosely knit, with contacts less regular. These men and women never gave up their ideals, and what is of as great importance, they raised their children in these basic principles so that the generations that followed them continued as fundamentally, though by no means exclusively, Christian, constitutional and nationalistic Americans, and these, despite their silence, number millions today. Many of them are watching with mounting fear the ever-changing events and the constantly increasing encroachment upon their personal rights, which had its beginning even before the First World War. These Americans some years ago, as in the past, when important issues arose, requested us to investigate and to help in the manner we did their parents. The problem of greatest concern to them, as it should be to every American, is the clearly outlined plans for the subjugation by mental demoralization and degeneration of the mass, all but the few, by the demonic methods described by Bertrand Russell. See reproduction of page 50 in his The Impact of Science on Society, from which we quote, and repeat again and again, in order to make the reader conscious of the extreme seriousness of the practices and intentions of the enemies of man and God. To these practices have been added others more insidious, and as destructive, and the mass actually believe them to be for their benefit, and willingly accept them. Fichte laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that, after pupils have left school, they would be incapable, throughout the rest of their lives, of thinking or acting otherwise than their schoolmasters 12 your health and sanity would have wished. Diet, to injections and injunctions will combine, from a very early age, to produce the type of character and sort of belief that the authorities 3 consider desirable. Double quote dash page 50, 1953 edition. Emphasis ours. The better informed public at large, who had read much of the literature on the methods at that time in practice, was becoming panic-stricken by the fear that these conscienceless and soulless agents would not be content with the methods they were using, but would discover other and perhaps more horrible means to carry out their plans. Complying with the many requests to undertake the outlined investigation, we made numerous lengthy trips throughout America, and the first volume of The Age of Treason was the result. When we accepted the assignment, we did so with the expressed proviso that whatever the results of our investigations, we would not indulge in personal and individual recrimination, name-calling, and/or defamation of character of any nature. 2. In the first edition of The Age of Treason, all of the diabolical methods recounted by Russell on page 50 and 51 of his book The Compact of Science on Society, were dealt with. Since then, the subject has become far too large to be properly considered in one volume. In the present volume, Your Health and Sanity, The Age of Treason, we will deal only with foods and liquids, the 2 things man must have to live, and the methods now being followed in adulterating both with toxic, cancer and other disease-creating additives. Another volume to follow, The Age of Treason, will expose and deal exhaustively with the many methods now being practiced to degenerate the minds of men into those of morons and imbeciles, that the victims may be readily controlled. 3. These authorities naturally are those who, by one means or another, have succeeded in gaining the power to force the mass to yield to their every wish. In The Age of Treason 13 we did not, and do not, believe in this form of character assassination. We feel that this has become so common that when an intelligent, educated, reasoning person reads of the commission of an almost incomprehensible and treasonable action, coupled with all manner of vilification, his conclusion and reactions are, the writer has an axe to grind. He is also conscious of the fact that those who do not belong to favored cliques, but labor for the welfare of humanity, will be vilified and persecuted. Hence it was agreed that however guilty of wrong any person might be, the act, not me person, would be exposed and condemned. It was also understood that, whenever possible, we would avoid offering our personal opinion or reaction of any occurrence, act, or affair. We would simply quote those who made reports, who had investigated or exposed methods practiced, giving them full credit. Our conclusions would be voiced only after a careful analysis, and full consideration based upon our own accurate knowledge point as a result of personal experience, and then leave it to the reader to study, reason, investigate, and arrive at the truth, and act, as a man should. Specifically, our desire from the very beginning of our efforts had, and still has, but one objective, the welfare of our fellow man. If we can succeed in awakening our true Americans to their great danger, our aim has been achieved. If not, it is recognized that every man has free will, and the right and opportunity to either save or damn himself. This text is the medium to expose to all who read it, in unmistakable terms, the numerous means the enemies of men and God have themselves frankly stated they have been doing to the teeming millions, what they are now doing, what they propose to do, and how they plan doing it, in their efforts to change the creature known and accepted, more especially by those who profess 14 your health and sanity themselves as Christians, as God's noblest creation, into morons, robots and zombies, imbeciles to be enslaved. to guard against misunderstanding, and the charge of repetition. Numerous statements, perhaps in different words or terms, will be made time and again throughout the text, in our endeavor to impress them the more firmly on the mind of the reader. Some of the writers quoted and accepted as authorities throughout the world, are positive in their statements. As, for ourselves, we prefer to imply, rather than to claim, that it is so. We feel, that by doing this we will avoid antagonism even among those who feel, as we do, and our conclusions will be the more readily accepted. It is our contention that he who knowingly permits another, even though that other be his enemy, to be misled, or harm to come upon him or upon those dear to him, is a traitor to his fellow man, his country and to his God. He is guilty of treason. So great has become the momentum of treason to the American people that even many of those in the highest positions whose duty it is to protect the American people, and who by taking the oath of their office should be the intermediary between the citizens and God in dispensing justice, have flagrantly betrayed their trust, actually turning over the citizens to the enemy. A correspondent, an attorney as well known in Washington as in his own city, after reading the text of the present volume, wrote us his impression. His conclusions are so vital to every American still filled with pride in his race, his manhood, and ideals for achievement, that we feel his statements should be included in this introduction. The thing that bothers me in addition to the things you have mentioned is the general apathy on the part of the people, also the fact that great masses of people the age of treason 15 are living the easy way which brings about lethargical conditions. But beyond this I wonder, if there is not some condition created by a general lowering of the human race to the animal level, so that a mass herd instinct seems to take control of them. For emphasis ours. Isn't there some evidence that, as humans become more and more materialistic they draw away from the spiritual impulse for individual development 5 and sink into the animal psyche? Is this not the ultimate result of the forces which reduce spiritual manifestation to the common mass level? Emphasis ours. For this is unquestionably true, and is no more than a repetition of what has happened in all nations that achieved greatness in the past. This general lowering of the human mass to an almost animal level or even lower, always follows, when life becomes too easy, too mechanical, hours of labor too short, labor itself made too easy, resulting in too much free time not devoted to constructive efforts. The very basis of a man's nature helping him to keep natural is, that he labors so as to become tired, and in want of rest at the end of the day. The poet had the correct concept, when he wrote, "For men must walk not play at work and women must weep that is, bear the burden of womanhood, motherhood and the labor connected therewith." Who, you question, desires this? Admittedly, comparatively few, but there are still many whose concepts of the founding fathers and personal achievement by effort remain their ideals, and whose faith in the prophecy of the seers of pre-biblical times that America is to ultimately become the land of the truly free will in due time come true despite all the destructive efforts of the enemies of God and men. It is for these God-loving and true Americans, and at their request, that we have labored to prepare this text. 5. This has happened time and again throughout the ages, and marked the beginning of the decadence of the race. This was recognized throughout all time, hence the warning, history repeats itself. Fortunately for humanity of the future, their 16 your health and sanity. Our hope is that this book will be found to be basically different from all others because of our refusal to follow the usual recrimination route, and that the reader will recognize that we have given those who have such great confidence in us, sufficient information to enable them to act, as reasonable human beings and, above all, God-fearing Americans should. Throughout uncounted centuries, morally and spiritually minded men were concerned more especially with one all-important edict, as it concerned their destiny. This is simply stated, fear not those who are able to destroy your body, but those who can destroy body and soul. The emphasis is placed on the soul of man, that being the only reality, the mental and physical being temporal. This divine edict has necessitated a change as the result of the machinations of an almost unbelievably vicious minority of human creatures to fear those who by usurped power have the means to destroy man's reason and manhood, thereby making of man an unreasoning being, a robot or zombie. Preventing were always groups of men, organized into those fraternities, who recognized this, and drew to themselves others of like nature in preparation for the final phase of the human drama. Outstanding among such drama were those of Sodom and Gomorrah, Nineveh, Babylon, Greece's Sapphoism and Rome's debauchery. In each instance, history did repeat itself. the ultimate end of races, or nations, were, as a whole, foreseen by John, as dearly indicated in his revelation. Yes, we still believe in a ruling power and a divine law that has the final word. John classified men into two categories, the chaff to be destroyed, and the wheat to be chosen, I.e., to live and father a new and more advanced race. The question is ever the same, to which class do you want to belong? 7. The age of treason. 17. Him from fulfilling his divine destiny by making the soul's awakening impossible. The methods employed for this purpose are now admittedly being pursued in America, the real American people generally being the victims. The procedures are the most vicious and diabolical the human mind could conceive. The express intent of our efforts is to expose some of the worst of these inhuman methods, that those who will may protect themselves and their families by means of same, divinely indicated methods at the command of all men and women. Finally, who is at fault? Who is responsible for these hideous and inhuman practices with worse to follow? How is it possible that among an intelligent and civilized people a single one of these evils has become possible? Let us, you and we, face the facts. It is because you, and you, not excusing ourselves, fail to assume our personal responsibilities, by not voting into office men imbued with the true American spirit. As we finish these final notes, we are listening to Metropolitan's rendition of Wagner's Twilight of the Gods and cannot help but wonder whether we are not in the twilight of man, and as with Wagner's gods we, by our own negligence, will fail to husband the divine inheritance. Sincerely given, R. Swinburne. Clymer, 1st edition, February 16, 1957, 2nd edition, June 17, Chapter 1.